So I'm Sheila Signet's CEO, and I also advise students directly through the college admissions process. I'm one of our admissions consultants, but I got a large team of people who also do this work. At Signet, we also do tutoring, test prep, executive function coaching, basically all the things you might need academically to help your kid get through high school successfully and on to that next step. So we like to think of ourselves as a one-stop shop for these academic needs. But today I'm going to talk to you about like kind of the bigger picture, right? And technically it is an admissions topic, but of course, college admissions is made up of all the wonderful things your kids are going to do in high school. So we might touch on some of these other things. Like we're going to talk about testing a little bit. We're going to talk about executive functions. So I just want you to kind of know we're talking about it all today in the hopes that it gives you a sense of what is this process and when should you do what, and more importantly, why, right? Because getting your teen on board often involves having a really good why, not just not just a what, right? I'm fully aware of that. Usually they listen to me better than they listen to you guys, but sometimes I'm still doing a lot of that, like, well, here's why, and let me explain this to you and convince you to do it the way I want you to do it. All right, with that said, I'm going to share my screen. Actually, I need to do this thing first. Sorry. I need to make this full screen so you see it all nice. And now I will share my screen and we will dive into some content. I am planning to leave, 15 minutes or so for questions. So feel free if you have questions while I'm going along to drop them in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that. And if it feels relevant to what we're talking about right at the moment, I'll pause and we'll address your question. Otherwise, we'll go back to all the questions that we collect over the course of the session towards the end. And then if we don't get to your question, you can always email me. I'm always happy to talk or send you my answer offline. Okay, so here we are, talk about your college admissions roadmap. It's important to plan ahead to position your kid for success. Now, that's not to say success is not possible without planning ahead, but it is a lot less stressful, right? And that's really one of my goals. Of course, I want your kids to go to an amazing college where they're going to thrive and have the experience that they want and go on to live, their fantastic life that I know is ahead of them. But I also want to help you not damage the relationship that you have with them in their last few years at home with you. I want to help you experience less stress, help you be a confident leader through this process of your child. So I'm going to kind of take you through a number of aspects of this process that will hopefully help you do that. All right, but first we're going to start with how are you feeling? A friend of mine introduced me to this on a scale of cat. Which number are you when it comes to thinking about college? Because Lord knows there are plenty of things in the world you could be feeling any of these things about right now. But when it comes to thinking about the college process for your child or children, which number represents you the best? And I'm going to wait until I get some answers. 6, Lakshmi. Oh, that's great. What a happy cat. Okay, we got a 4, snoozing. Maybe just really relaxed. Ooh, somebody's angry. Oh my goodness, Carolyn, we have an 8. Oh boy, okay. Oh, and a 9, just distracted. Okay, great. There are no number ones up here. I'm surprised by that. Or number 7s. Yes, Lakshmi, this is hilarious. If you look closely at every picture, they really are very descriptive of a state of being. Okay, depending on the day, we could be a 5 or an 8. All right. Now the real question here that is probably, yes, Eileen, how you're feeling after you speak with your student. It's influenced by how your kid is feeling, and hopefully they're not drinking. But how is your kid feeling about the college process right now? How stressed are they? How checked out are they? How angry are they? How anxious are they? Give me your best guess at where your kids are. Okay, yeah, sleep in. Oh God, what was me, number 5? Number 3 is so funny. Okay, all right. 4, 6, depending on the day. Okay, I'll take that. I'll take, a little checked out and just happy. That's great. That's a great place to be. I would say that's where we always want to be. And we know it changes day by day. I mean, minute by minute with the teenager, right? And of course, your stress, your mood is affected by that. But I also want you to think about how much your stress, your mood, your attitude towards this process may be impacting your teenager, right? They're reading your body language, your emotions to understand how maybe they should be feeling about it, right? I talk to a lot of families where a parent calls me and they're so stressed and so anxious and they have a million questions. And they say it's because, oh, my kid is so stressed out. And then I talk to the student and they're like, yeah, my mom is really stressed out about this. So I'm trying to calm her down by like asking you some questions, right? And of course, we never want our kids to manage our emotions for us. So just a little bit of reflection here. What's the two-way street here? Because it always is a two-way street, right? And the thing I want to point out is wherever your kid is at any given moment, you are the grown-up, you are the parent, here you are forced to be in a place of leadership, even though we know they're teenagers they don't want to listen to, right? But there are things that you can do to inspire their confidence in you. And one is by having a clear timeline. I'm glad you're here because I'm going to give you one. Clear priorities. We're also going to go through those today. Communication strategies that actually work for your teenager, and you know them best. So I'm going to give you a bunch and you get to try things out and decide what might work and what wouldn't work. And then being clear on what support you need so that you can be in your best headspace around all of this stuff, right? So that your questions are answered and that you are not having to take on too much. You already have so much on your plate, right? Having to also be the guidance counselor and the college advisor and the essay editor is probably not ideal for you, right? So think about what support you need. And this is basically our agenda for today. And it hopefully will result for you in calm, confident leadership through the admissions process. Okay, that's our goal. I want to start by reminding you that the application itself, which is all of these things here in the bullet points, is not the same as the process, right? The application is documentation of how they have spent their time in high school. What classes did they take and what grades did they earn? What did they do in their extracurriculars? How do they show up in the classroom and in the school? What do they care about? All of these things are things that they have to kind of live life and go through the experience of high school to really understand about themselves and to have something to show on the application, right? So we don't want you to think that the college process starts in 12th grade. In fact, it starts the very first day of ninth grade. And for many people, they like to start even earlier thinking about, well, what are the skills and talents we're really going to invest in building? I don't really recommend that. I think it's much better to have sort of a free range childhood until you start to get to high school where you can still explore, but we want to kind of collect the data and reflect on what those experiences were so that we can kind of shape, all right, you liked this thing, let's do more of it, or let's do something else like it. Or you really had a bad reaction to this, maybe we got to go in another direction, or maybe there's some skills that we need to build underneath that so that you feel more confident in this area, right? So it's not so much as you need a strategy the first day of ninth grade and you need to like abide by it so you can tell a specific story by the time you get to 12th grade. It's more like, let's start paying attention to what they like, what they don't like, what lights them up, what they're good at, what they struggle with, so that you can make any interventions necessarily, you can support them the way they want to, or you can help them focus on those things that are their strengths and their passions and help them relax a little bit on the other stuff, of course, fulfilling whatever requirements they need to fulfill. All right, so application does not equal the process. So let's talk about what that process looks like. And this is my best recommendation for you. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. And again, I am recording. You're going to get this recording, so don't feel like you got to take notes or memorize everything I'm saying. You can always go back to the recording. So like I said, some people start before ninth grade. So I did make the first phase 8th to 10th grade, but this is perfectly fine to start whenever in high school. And in fact, it doesn't stop in 10th grade. I just think that should be your focus in those early years of high school. Really honing in on what your values are, understanding your interests, building skills, getting better at building and maintaining relationships. These are lifelong pursuits, right? And one of the things that we're trying to do here at Signet is help students take advantage of this college process to set themselves up for the life that they want to have, right? And that involves understanding those skills and interests and their values, and building great relationships and learning how to reflect and set goals for themselves, right? So in terms of what you need to do in the college process, there are no actual milestones or tasks that you need to finish in those early years of high school. But those are such valuable years for doing a lot of the foundational work on personal development, right? And it will come into play later in the process, but planting those seeds early is really, really great. So that might look like encouraging your student to try a bunch of different clubs and extracurriculars so they can learn what kind of people they want to spend their time with, or what social issues they care about, or if they're involved in some sort of academic or skill-based club like the robotics club or the math league or whatever, they can really see, oh, do I want to do more of this? Do I want to engage in this topic more deeply? And again, having them reflect and collect the data about that experience is really the key to making those early years as valuable as possible to them. Um, I get a lot of comments from parents being like, well, what are you really doing when you're working with a kid in ninth and 10th grade? And the answer is, I'm just talking to them about what they care about. I'm talking to them about what teachers they seem to like, what material they find interesting, or what books they've read, and helping them name those interests that they are actually demonstrating. So I'm not telling them, oh, I think you should be interested in X. I'm saying, oh, based on what you just told me, it sounds like you really like genetics. Maybe you want to take an online course or watch a TED Talk, or I don't know if there are any TED Talks about genetics, but look at this person's biography. I think that might really resonate with you. And if it doesn't, that also tells us something, right? But it's sort of about having a bias to action, to trying things out, and then sort of keeping mental track of what resonated and what didn't, right? And in those early years of high school as well, it's really important to help your student get their feet underneath them academically. So that's not exactly on this slide, but we will talk about it in a few slides. Learning the independence that is required in high school, learning to manage their workload, learning to communicate on their own behalf with teachers and other people in the school. These are really important things for them to get better at and feel more confident around in the early years of high school. It's going to set them up for success later in high school, which we know, of course, leads to a stronger college application. But it's also, like I said, one of those life skills. When you're in a new environment, you got to figure it out. You got to learn the system and learn the rhythms, and build the skills that are going to help you thrive there, right? So that's the first phase. It's a little more kind of soft skilly, right? Then we get into 10th and 11th grade. And I say this is planning and organization. This is where you might actually be checking off some of those milestones of the things you need to be able to submit with your college application, right? And I say this starts in 10th grade, really kind of starts latter half of 10th grade, maybe even summer after 10th grade, where we start with understanding what's your testing strategy. And of course, the majority of colleges in the United States are test optional. I think it's over 80% right now, but there are some very selective schools that do want to see tests, and some schools that are not all that selective, they still want to see tests as well. And this is not to say everybody needs to test. It's about understanding what your testing strategy is, right? So I did a presentation on this, I believe, last month. The short version of that is, let's take some practice tests. Let's see how you respond to the SAT, to the ACT. How did it feel in terms of the content? How did it feel in terms of the pacing and your endurance and all of these things? And let's see if you're already sort of naturally scoring at a level that would make us feel like, oh, a test score could be very helpful in your application, right? Or you could score high enough that, these schools that require tests that are very selective, Yeah, those could be in range for you. It will also help you decide, do we do the SAT or do we do the ACT? Every four-year college in the United States accepts both without bias. It can also help you understand, all right, if we're going to test, what do we need to study? What do we need to work on? When should we take the test? Right? So there are all these kind of questions around testing that you just want to get answers for. It doesn't mean you have to start prepping for the test or even register for a test date or commit to testing. It's just about understanding where your student is, where they might end up, and what that means for the larger college process, right? And at the same time, ideally, you're starting the college research process, excuse me. So what that might look like in the early stages is, oh, you're on vacation somewhere and there's a college in that town. Well, let's just go stroll around campus and see what that's about, right? Not to say your kid might want to go to that school, but you'll get a sense for what does a 7,000 student open campus look like in the suburbs of a major city, right? And that might mean you don't have to do college visits later if you're looking at a 7,000 student open campus college in the suburbs of a major city. You kind of know what that looks like, right? So you could be doing just sort of light informational visits. You could have your student be looking on websites of colleges that, for whatever reason, they may be interested in. Maybe it's where you went to school or some family member went to school and they've developed an interest in that school, or it's their favorite sports team and they always dreamed of going to that school and rooting on that team. Have them start doing some research, and it could be around, what majors does this school offer? What does campus life look like? Are students happy there? What do they go on to do? And what do their academics look like? The average admitted student, what is their average GPA or average test score? So they can start to understand, is that place actually a fit for who I am and what I want to study and the kind of people I want to be around and the way I want to learn? Right. And then as you round the corner into the fall of 11th grade, we're really going to switch modes from just sort of like, let me check some things out and see how I feel, to let me start actually building a list. Right. And that list building process, again, I had a whole, actually, I think I have a webinar on every one of these bullet points in this particular stage. So you can go to our YouTube page and find all of those. But building a list is a whole process in itself, where we start with like naming some preferences. And it's a lot easier to name preferences if your student has seen a couple of different kinds of campuses before, right? So we name some preferences. We try to understand, all right, what is it that you might want to study? Not to say you have to commit to a major, but wherever you go to school, we want to make sure there are things there that you want to study, right? So we look at kind of what are the offerings. I have a lot of students who play, a sport in high school very seriously, but they don't want to be a student athlete and play on the school team, the college team, or go through the athletic recruiting process. But at the same time, field hockey has been a really big part of their life and they would still like to be able to play. So they want to make sure there's a club field hockey team that they could join. Right. So we want to look for those things like, obviously the needs and the wants, and then these little preferences of, I prefer to be at a place where I could row, or I prefer to be at a place where there are a lot of internships available in the surrounding city, right? In the industry that maybe I'm interested in. Or there's a lot of research opportunities available because I want to go into the sciences. So whatever those preferences, needs, and wants are, we want to name them, and then we want to do the research to find the schools that fit our criteria. And then we want to look more deeply into those schools to say, okay, is this really a fit for me? Is the vibe right? Right? Is it realistic that I would get in? What kind of student really goes there and what do they do in their free time? Is that the kind of student I am? And this is a long process. It's not something that's going to happen in a month. I usually spend 6 to 9 months going through this process with my students, because a lot of them will come in and say, oh, I'm only applying to these Ivy League schools. And when I start asking why, and we start peeling back the layers and really understanding what each school is about, they're like, oh, wait, Columbia is not a fit for me, or Brown is not a fit for me, and Columbia really is, right? Once they sort of understand the character of each of these schools and how that might fit with what they want from their college experience or what they want to do after, right? So that's a long process. And part of that process is doing visits, right? So I mentioned those sort of casual informational visits that you might do early on in this stage. But at some point, you actually want to do the official tour for the schools you're most interested in. Some of these schools are going to track whether you've come to see them. But more importantly, most of these schools will also ask, why do you want to go here? And those visits are just chock full of information because you're going to meet your tour guide who happens to major in the thing you want to major in. They can tell you so much about what life is like there. You're going to see it. You're going to meet other people. You might try the food. And you might talk to a professor or sit in a class. And then you have really specific information to talk about in those essays. You also have that confidence, that gut feeling. Yes, this is a place where my child will thrive, and I can see them here, and I can see them finding their tribe here, and really taking advantage of all these wonderful opportunities. Right, so you're going to do kind of more serious visits, and then that all feeds into our application strategy and narrative. And by now we are in the spring of 11th grade. Right? A lot of people like to save visits for spring break. Some schools do a February break. Those are all great times. And then once you've kind of crystallized that list, now you have a set of schools that you know you're going to be speaking to, right? The best writing connects with its audience. And the same thing goes for what your application is trying to communicate, right? You need to know your audience. Right. And so this is not to say you're just going to tell them what they want to hear, what you think they want to hear. This is, what do I have to offer a school like them? Right. And how can I demonstrate that to them throughout the whole application? It's not just planning essay topics. It is also, what order do I list my activities in? What do I say about those activities? Who do I ask for recommendations that I know experience this quality of mine that I really want to demonstrate to the school? Right? So there are all kinds of ways to communicate across the different elements of the application that I just flashed on the screen a little bit earlier. The essays, the recommendations, the activity list, even the courses that you're choosing communicate something to the school. Right? So we kind of want to get that bigger picture of, okay, these are the schools I like. This is why I like them. This is what I like about them. Now, what do I have sort of in my closet that I can show them that is going to demonstrate to them that I'm a great fit for their school, and I'm going to be able to bring a lot of really interesting things and contribute to their community. Right. And I like to do that in spring of 11th grade. It's when college is really on the mind of the student. And we're about to turn the corner into actually writing the application. Right. And so I recommend this is started the summer after 11th grade, where we're like just filling out the forms. It's very tedious. And we're actually working on the essays. And, you know, it's fine if you want to collect essay ideas over the course of high school. It's not really helpful for them to start writing those things until they get to that point, until they've had the experiences, until they've developed as a writer, until you know the audience that they're talking to, right? When all of those kind of click into place, now's the time we can start saying, okay, this is the story we want to tell them, and this is how we're going to do it, right? I mentioned the activity list. What order are we saying these activities in? What are we saying about them? In the Common App right now, there's space for 10 activities. Some students end up having more than that or less than that, and that's totally fine. But for those students who have more than that, they're going to have to decide which are the 10 most meaningful, which 10 say the thing about me that I really want to communicate in this piece of the application. And maybe can I use other parts of the application to talk about this experience I had, or this other thing that I'm not going to be able to list on the activity list. The positioning is what I call, like, what are we doing for early action or early decision versus regular decision? Are we going to do an early decision too, right? This is like a real layer of strategy over this whole thing that can be very nuanced. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here, but if you have a question about it, we can maybe take it in the question section. But before committing, to a particular school with an early application, you really want to make sure, what does this mean for the rest of your list? And what does it mean for the stories you're telling, right? And then, of course, we need to polish everything. Right. And this doesn't mean run it through ChatGPT or have, your cousin who is a literature major correct your writing for you. It's just really making sure that like there are no egregious errors or typos, that you're using language correctly, that you're demonstrating your actual ability to communicate, and that you're putting your best foot forward across the whole application. And sometimes having an outside perspective of somebody who didn't work on the application with you or maybe doesn't know you that well, their eyes are fresher and they can be very, very helpful to bring someone in at that point in the process. All right. You're probably tired of seeing this slide. I'm going to show you it in a slightly different format, right? These are 3 phases and a couple of things to do in each phase. But at Signet, we really like to think about this as a journey. We take that journey metaphor very seriously, right? So this is a whole map, right? And of course, there are things that are not represented on the map, but this is how we like to take students through high school with an eye on the college process, right? And you'll see that the early stages here are really about getting to know yourself and your own interests and practicing articulating that. And then we start, making our plans, building our lists, and then we write our story. And we're preparing for interviews, we're doing all our polishes. And then, it doesn't really end at college, right? We need to prepare for the college transition. Everything comes after that. But along this climb, so to speak, they've learned a lot about themselves. They've built a lot of skills, including project management and organization skills. And they're going to go off to college with all that sort of in their backpack. And they're going to be ready to tackle whatever life throws at them after this, right? That's the goal, right? We want to launch them and feel confident that they're going to do all the great things that they're meant to do, that they're not going to trip up, that they are going to take advantage of the opportunities in front of them, that they're going to be okay, right? And so I don't want you to forget that, yes, this is the process of applying somewhere, but this is also a really important milestone in your parenting journey, right? So I don't want you to reduce the college process to just, okay, check, 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 check. We did all those things and we submitted the essays. It's really a process for personal growth and for your relationship with your student to start to change, right? As they get further along in high school, hopefully they're gaining a little more independence. They're building your confidence in them to be able to handle certain things. And you're letting go of the reins a little bit so that they can launch successfully, right? So it's a journey for everybody. Now, beyond just knowing the timeline and what you need to do, we really need to get real about priorities. And this is one of the most important things, perspectives that a parent can hold for their child, right? Sometimes you see a list of things and you're like, okay, I got to do all of them. I got to do them all at once. But that's just not smart. And it's also not true. Chances are if you try to do everything all at once, you're not going to do any of it very well. Right. And in the college process, in high school, not everything matters the way you think it does. And not everything matters the same. There are things that matter a lot more than other things, right? So we've got to keep these priorities straight. And that can also help your child engage in this process with you, right? Because if you come at them with like your hair on fire and we got to do 15 things all at once and we only have 2 weeks, they're going to be like, oh my God, no way, I'm out, right? Or I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to avoid it or I'm going to procrastinate, right? But if you can sort of plan ahead, understand that timeline, and keep your priorities straight about what to do when, it's going to be a lot more manageable for them and for you. Okay. And I'm going to go through what really matters. You can see that's my last bullet point on this slide. But I want to remind you that colleges are actually selective, not competitive. And to unpack that, what that means is it's not about being the best in every category, or every thing that you submit in the application has to be maximized in some way, right? Um, Colleges get enough applications that they can fill their class several times over, and the most selective colleges, several times over with, valedictorians, people who have 99th percentile test scores, who have done research at a, real college level lab. There are lots of kids like that these days, especially, right? Um, and what colleges are trying to do is select the children, the students, sorry, selecting the children sounds a little weird, selecting the students that are going to create the culture and maintain the culture that they want at their school, right? The academic aspects, the I don't know, maybe school spirit or athletic aspects, the social aspects of their school. And so they're really selecting for students who are a fit with their mission, with their values, with their level of academic rigor, with their opportunities. And so it's really important for students to understand their actual strengths and lead with those to the right colleges that are going to respond to those strengths, right? They can't turn themselves into something that they're not. So it's much better for them to have a real sense of what those strengths are and then be able to use them in this process. And then by understanding these priorities, you're going to know what's going to have a greater impact, right? You can think about, all right, the opportunity cost or the ROI of doing the test a third time versus getting an earlier start on the essays, right? Or should we go to this expensive program on a college campus, or should they continue their work at this camp that is really meaningful to them, right? You can start to understand, oh, this is going to matter more, so we should focus here and not try to do everything, right? So you can release that pressure and help them focus, because beyond what they're hearing from you, they're hearing a ton of stuff from their peers, from social media, from the regular media, like news stories about some kid who had a perfect score and did all the things and still didn't get into some school, so they're going to think they have no possible chance, right? They're hearing a lot of stuff that is really freaking them out. So when you can say, no, it's clear this is the thing that matters most, we should focus here, they're going to believe you and be relieved. They don't have to do everything. They can do this one thing really well for the next 3 weeks, right? And so I want to show you how we can tell what matters. I'm going to show you some data slides, and hopefully they're not too boring. Now, this is from a report that the National Association for College Admissions Counseling puts out every year. And it's called Factors in the Admissions Decision. It's publicly available. You can Google it and get the latest update, right? And so what it does is a survey of several hundred colleges and asks them to rank in order of importance these different things that go along or are reported on the college application, right? And the numbers I'm showing you here is the percentage of schools said 76% or 76% of the schools surveyed said high school grades and college prep courses was of considerable importance, which is the highest importance category, right? Then 74% said total high school grades, meaning like the overall GPA. Then 63% said the strength of the curriculum was really, really important, right? I'll point out these are all academic factors. So academics matter more than anything else, right? The grades in the courses, how hard those courses were. Then it moves into character, right? And then the essays, which is really a reflection of character. How much a student is interested in going to that school, right? Can they tell this student mentioned some other college in their essay because they just copied and pasted it? Well, they don't really want to go here, right? This is called demonstrated interest, and some schools track it and some schools don't. Then we go down to counselor recommendation, right? It's moderate importance. Teacher recommendations, right? Those are pretty important, in the 40s. Extracurriculars, right? So you can kind of see how this goes. Now, this is aggregate data. You can see college level data, right? And I'm going to show you this. This is overall, right? A wide selection of, pretty selective and non-selective schools. But if we look at specific colleges, and I just grabbed the Ivy League because everybody's obsessed with the Ivy League. I grabbed from their common data set, which the government collects this data every year from every school that takes federal funding. And yes, the whole thing is in turmoil right now, but we're just going to pretend that's not happening while we're having this conversation. You can Google this common data set and the name of the institution. You will find their institutional reporting for several years. I mean, some of these go back, 30, 40 years of records you could look at. I don't know why you would want to, but it's there. So I grabbed the information for the Ivy Leagues and I tried to color code it so we could see very easily. Now, Harvard is unique in that it doesn't want to tell us anything. They just say whether it's considered or not considered. But all these other schools will tell us, is it very important? That's the VI. Is it important? That's the I. Is it just considered? They look at it. Maybe not that important, or not considered. They don't care. Right? And so we kind of get a sense of the trend here, what's really important. And it's very much in line with that other total like national survey of schools. Academics and the rigor are the most important. Then we go to character and personal qualities, the recommendations, and then the essays. And, depending on the school, the extracurriculars might be very important, right? Scores, it depends on the policy of the school, which of course we had a lot of changes in the last couple of years. Special talents and abilities are often considered at these schools. And then you can see, all the rest of this stuff here. So I encourage you, as you're building your school list, don't do this from the outset, but as you have, a more narrow list of maybe 15 to 20 schools, go and look at their common data set to see what matters the most. So you can assess, okay, yeah, my kid's GPA is really great. So that we got that covered, right? But what else do they think is really important that maybe we don't have covered yet? Right? And that can help you maybe plan out, what do they do over the summer? What do we want to emphasize in the essays? Who do we want to ask for recommendations, right? So you can use this to inform kind of your strategy, right? And even the development of your student over several years. So I hope that's helpful. That's how we know what matters. I'm not just making this up, right? But there's actual data. And the way I like to frame it to people is in this match pyramid. And I've only got a couple more slides here. The base of it is the academics. We know that's most important. Then I put values and then the remarkable factor. And I like this as just a really easy visual to understand what's foundational, but what also actually gets you selected at a particular school. So to move through this a little bit more quickly and give you those details, under academics, we have the GPA and the rigor, as we've already discussed. Test scores, if they are required or considered, are going to be a reflection of academic ability. But the thing that most people don't understand also plays a role here are executive functions. So I want to draw your attention to that, especially if your child is earlier in high school. They probably have some executive function work to do, whether or not they're neurodiverse. Everybody has executive function work to do. And we can strengthen these things through practice, through accommodating strategies, through tools, through routines. There are lots of things you can do. But if this is a challenge for your student, and to define executive functions, it's like all the things we need to know how to do in order to get things done. Organization. I put note-taking. Emotional regulation is actually part of this, the impulse control, right? Setting a goal and moving towards it, even just getting started with something or remembering the final step of turning that thing in, right? These are really foundational to their ability to get good grades, to take harder classes, to earn a good test score, right? These are foundational. So don't sleep on it. Make sure you're addressing this, okay? And they will also come into play in the major complicated project of putting the whole application together, right? They need to be able to write a whole essay or several essays. They need to keep these requirements straight, right? They need to finish things by a deadline. So executive functions are never something I say don't invest in. So definitely address that if that is an issue for your child. Then the middle layer of that pyramid I showed you is values. This is where all that positive character attributes show up, right? And on the application, that's going to be reflected in their teacher recommendations. How does this kid show up in the classroom? How do they treat their peers? How do they treat their teachers? They're literally questions on the form that your teachers will have to fill out that ask about those things. Their extracurriculars also signal their values, right? Do they care about collaborating with other people to accomplish, I don't know, environmental goals, right? Are they a dedicated artist? Are they part of a sports team? Maybe there are some social causes or volunteer causes that they, dedicate a lot of time to, and that says something about what they care about, right? So that's one of the things we're thinking about as we look through a student's extracurricular list. What values are being communicated here? And that's why I always say, don't do something just because you think it's going to look good on your college application. It's telling a story about you, right? If you love it, but you don't really know why or how it fits in with everything else, that's fun. Do the things that you love, right? We'll figure out what's the connection between this thing and that thing, or why does this light you up? It might be a really interesting essay to show the college, especially if it seems like an outlier, right? Among all of your other things. Which brings me to the essays. This is the place where a student can most explicitly articulate what they care about, what kind of person they are, and why, and what they're going to bring to the campus, right? So I'm not saying every student needs to write an essay about, my values are this. That would be pretty boring. But really the stories that they're telling, at least on American applications, very different if you're applying to colleges outside the United States. But on US applications, what they really want to understand is, what kind of person are you? Tell us a story about personal growth and how you got to be this way, or how your interests developed. And that is also really saying something about what kind of person they are and what their values are. And then the very top of that pyramid is what I call the remarkable factor. And it's going to be different for every student. So I can't tell you it's always a special talent, or it's always a passion, or it's also always just something that, they're randomly curious about. I've met so many students over our years of doing this. We just calculated this, something like 13,000 students we've served since we started. That is just a mind-boggling number because we only do one-on-one work. And we're not a huge team. So we worked with a lot of people over our 18 years here. Every student is different. Every student is remarkable. This is not something you have to go out of your way to develop in your student. It's more about observing them, paying attention. What's the thing that they're gravitating to? What's the common thread among their friendships? What really lights them up, or what can't they help themselves from doing? And this excludes like being on their phone or playing video games, right? Like, what is the thing that they just like can't stop obsessing about, right? I had a student once who was obsessed with a certain specific South Asian dish, and like he would just eat it wherever he went. And as we explored it, it really represented a lot of things for him, and he was searching for something in trying it. I had another student who actually made a spreadsheet of how he spent every day of his life. Another student who loves doing people's nails because she gets to talk to them about what's going on in their life, and they confide in her things that you wouldn't normally confide to someone you barely know, right? And it's helped her really understand people. It's helped her communication skills. It's helped her build relationships. Another student I'll tell you about, and then we'll move on, has a part-time job at a pharmacy. And, that might sound boring for a high school student. He doesn't want to be a pharmacist or go into, health services or anything like that. But he says he meets people from all walks of life in a very vulnerable state. Like, you have to go get medicine for, maybe some embarrassing condition, and you have to talk to the person at that desk. And so he sees people at their most vulnerable, and he's developed some really interesting observations just about, humanity. And I think that's really remarkable to see in a teenager, especially a teenage boy, right? And as we're planning the applications, we want to make sure that remarkable factor is relevant to those colleges. Now, that's not to say you pick a remarkable factor that fits some college. It should be obvious, because you've chosen the right colleges that are the right fit for your student, that this remarkable factor is really going to impress that college. It's going to be what they're looking for, right? That student I said who was obsessed with that dish, it really represented all kinds of community for him. And he applied early and got into a college that really cares about community. right? And when I showed him that, I was like, like there's this whole community theme in here, kind of underneath this obsession. And, this school, one of their top values is community. And he's like, wow, what a coincidence. And I was like, it's not a coincidence at all. Our research led us to this school. Your preferences, your strengths, your remarkable factor led us to this school that is the perfect fit for you, right? And there may be more than one school. There's not just one perfect fit. But that should be something that resonates with those colleges that you are applying to. Right. Okay, Sanford, that is a great question we will come back to. This is my last set of slides here. I promise you get a break from hearing me talk. I want to give you some advice because I'm sure this all sounds great. Okay, you have some clarity, but like, what do you do with it? How do you get it across to your kid and how do you bring them along with you, right? I want to remind you that this big picture strategy is so important, but most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, it's too overwhelming for your teenager. They don't need to hear all of it. They don't want to hear all of it. They're not going to understand all of it. So you kind of have to hold that in mind and then like piecemeal it out to them as they need to understand some things, right? And that's why you setting those priorities and understanding that timeline can be so important because you'll know when, okay, we're about to start this next focus. And these are the things you need to understand about why this is important and how this is going to build. And beyond that, you don't really need to worry about all this other stuff that, maybe your friends are talking about. And we want to, as much as possible, really give them specific small actions or tasks to do. And especially if they're just starting this process or, your kids best, the lower the stakes, the better, right? And it might be just, spend 15 minutes rambling into your voice recorder about this thing that you say is so interesting and meaningful to you, right? We are not writing an essay. We're not showing it to anybody. We just want you, the student, to go and record yourself talking about it. Some realization is going to come out of that, right? And maybe at some point they transcribe what they recorded and it becomes the basis of some essay. But that's a very small, low stakes action. Or if you're trying to get them to work with a tutor, just talk to them for 15 minutes. You don't have to start working with them, but like just meet them, see what happens, right? And in most cases, they meet the tutor, they like the tutor, they realize, oh, this person can really help me. I want to do it, right? Instead of just saying, here's your tutor. Those sorts of things. If you're putting too much on them or asking a lot of them, they're just going to resist you, whether the thing makes sense or not, right? It feels too big. And our teenagers like to resist us. That's just what they're designed for at this moment in time. I'll also say one of the things that parents can do is just help them clear the space for the priorities that you've set, right? I know that students often think they have to do all the things. I had a student sign up for like 6 different summer programs, and I'm like, when are you going to have time to think over the summer or rest or recover from the school year? She's got essays to write, right? When are you going to do that, right? If you're taking on all of these different opportunities, which yes, they are great. If you're taking them all on, when are you going to do this other stuff that actually needs to get done right now? Right? Or maybe there are a lot of family trips or events that are happening, and maybe your student doesn't have to go to all of them so that you can help them clear some time and space to do this important work. You should also just consider what mentors would be helpful to your kid. I had a conversation with a mom recently who was like, my kids' test scores aren't lining up with their academics, how they do in school. And, it's not like a test prep situation. It's more like confidence. It's more like keeping the test in perspective. It's kind of all these bigger picture things. And I was like, I think they just need a mentor who can help them keep that perspective and maybe offer them a little bit of advice, but like empower them, right? Help them feel more confident in the face of this test that kind of scares them. So she was like, oh yeah, they have a cousin who is a 3rd year at this college. Maybe, that would be a really great opportunity for them to kind of talk about this sort of thing, right? So it doesn't always have to be a tutor or an admissions consultant. There are lots of people who serve that role in your student's life. It might be a teacher or a sports coach or somebody who leads a club or someone at your church or, someone in your community. But there are also professionals who can help your student through, these specific tasks of building, a college list or writing an essay. Because, there's just a lot of emotional baggage when a parent tells you to do something, right? I'm 45 and I still feel that way when my parents ask me to do something. I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. So maybe it'll go away someday. But working with a third party, hearing that advice from somebody else, it's going to land better. Right. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation here, what do you need? Not just what does your kid need, but what do you need to help you, get through all this, keep the priorities straight, make sure your kid's on tasks, right? Get your little random questions answered. So having someone who can serve as a project manager, even a go-between, a sounding board, a facilitator, maybe a therapist, depending on what you need. But parents play such an important role in this process. So it's important for you to be able to show up the way you want to in this process for your kid, right? And that might mean you need a little extra help, and that's fine because we all need a little extra help. All right, that is my presentation. I'm not going to leave the screen share on, but I do want to point you to that contact information. If you RSVP'd, you probably found our website or you've gotten emails from me, so you have this. There's our phone number. You can always call. We always start with a free consultation to understand where you are and how we might be able to help. And we will be the first to tell you if we can't help you or you need something that we don't do, right? So it's not we're never going to do the hard sell. We're really focused on getting you what you need. So, please don't hesitate to call us or go to our website. You can pick a time for a call right from the website. All right. I'm going to stop. Oh, that didn't stop my screen share. That stops my screen share. I'm going to stop my screen share and we're going to go over to questions. I know I said I would give you 15 minutes. I'm only giving you 7. I'm sorry, but we've got 2 questions. I'm going to go through them as fast as I can. And if you have other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. So Sanford asked his question about what's the most effective way to express when I was talking about the remarkable factor. I remember when that came in. And so it is an aspect of continuity, but it is also both more and less than that, right? We want to make sure these different parts of the application are working together coherently. I did a post on LinkedIn just the other day about the Frankenstein application, where we haven't paid attention to what the transcript is saying and what the essay is saying and how they may conflict or something like that, right? We don't want a Frankenstein application. We're not just sewing random pieces together, right? There has to be some, unity to that. And that unity is ideally your authentic student, right? If these are things that they're authentically caring about and thinking about, that will be the unifying thread. But you want to make sure you're not restating things too many times, right? Like there really shouldn't be overlap between the main essay and the supplemental essays, or what's said about an activity in the activity list and what you say about it in an essay that asks about a meaningful extracurricular. Right. So we want to be careful with the deployment of that content. But essentially, yes, you're right. There will be some sort of continuity across all of these items, right? I like to think about the application as actually a portfolio, and all the pieces are adding to our understanding of the student, right? They're not hitting you over the head with one aspect over and over and over again. Right? We're getting depth, we're getting surprises, we're getting, the history of their development, right? So it's a really full picture. I hope that helps. Sureka asked, if AP courses are not specifically offered, how do you assess the value in independently preparing and taking AP exams, and where would you put that on the roadmap? Okay, so AP courses are not something specifically that colleges are looking for, especially if they're not required at your school or they're not offered at your school. And really, they're many types of schools that don't offer AP classes. Sometimes it's a school in a rural district that just doesn't have the money or the students who would take those classes. They don't offer them. But sometimes they are the most impressive prep schools. I will tell you, I know of many day and boarding schools that do not offer AP classes because the advanced classes they offer are actually more advanced than the AP curriculum, right? And so when your application is filed, if you're using the common application, the counselor is writing something that explains the curriculum of the school, right? What kinds of classes are offered, if there are any of these special curriculums, whether that's AP or IB or the Cambridge system or what have you. Um, and then they also will say this student took an above average rigor or average rigor for, the population that we have here at the school. So they get some of that information. They also get what's called the school profile, which gives them a lot more detail about what is offered at the school and what's the traditional kind of trajectory of the student. So I don't want you to, in my answer here, think that AP classes are required, right? They're just not. But if your student takes an advanced biology class that is pretty similar to what is taught in an AP biology class, even though that's not offered at your school, and they want to take the AP exam, they can. AP scores are not that important to colleges. You can look on the factors in the admissions decision. I feel like it's 12 or 16 or something down the list. In order of importance, of course, you can look at the common data set to see if a college is going to tell you if they look at AP scores. So it's really just another way to maybe document, validate that they have done some sort of learning around a subject in an advanced way, right? Which is not a bad thing, but I don't think you should go out of your way to take AP exams independently if that's not relevant to what your student is actually doing, right? A lot of these schools, like I said, there are some prep schools that don't offer AP classes because their classes are more advanced. A lot of them will say, okay, now that we've gone through the first 3/4 of the semester or the year, you're probably ready to take that AP exam if you want to. Or this course, like in the course description, this course generally aligns with that curriculum. So many students will take the AP exam at the end of the year, right? So it's a very long-winded answer. Of course, it's very nuanced for each school, but that's what I think about your question, Sarika. So let me know if I answered it correctly or comprehensively enough. Okay, great. Sanford has another good question. For extracurricular courses and interests, how do colleges assess value and importance of college campus-based summer classes, gifted education courses, whether on-site or online, or straightforward community college? Oh, this is you've got great questions today, Sanford. Okay, I'm going to try to do them separately because they are really separate questions. So college campus-based summer classes usually have nothing to do with admissions, right? They are ways that a college can make money over the summer and use their facilities that are going underutilized. That is the reality, right? And it's a way for their instructors to make more money by teaching another course over the summer, right? I know when I was in grad school, they always offered me the summer program courses to teach. And, as a poor grad student, I did them, right? I taught them. But it doesn't, just because your student gets into the summer program at University of Pennsylvania doesn't mean they stand a better chance of getting into University of Pennsylvania if they apply as a first year. What I do say is that those experiences can still be valuable to students. Sometimes they're getting exposed to independent living for the first time, or they have an interesting roommate situation that they have to overcome. They're exposed to some academic content that they never could have learned in high school on their own. And so it can be valuable to building the profile in that way, but it's not the fact that they did it at that particular school or that particular program, right? Gifted education courses are a little bit different. Depends on if they're earning some kind of credit for it, if they're taking, math at CTY over the summer, and then they can test out of that math in their high school, right? That might allow them to get to more advanced classes and get that rigor, right? But a college is not going to say, oh, he did that, let's give this kid some bonus points, right? They're going to look at the transcript and say, oh, this kid was very proactive. They must be very interested. They got to a really high level in this math class. That's great, right? And that's what they're going to be evaluating. And similarly with community college, dual enrollment is becoming much more popular. It's a great way for students to get to those more advanced classes, maybe earn some college credits before they actually go off to college. Depending on the school, they may or may not transfer as college credit, but they may count for high school credit. And then, your student doesn't have to do some whatever class it is at their high school. I will tell you that taking classes at a college is usually very impressive, right? They are handling the workload of a college student. It obviously requires a lot more independence and motivation, discipline to get through that class. You're not getting all the handholding that you get in a high school class. So that does tell them something about how they're going to handle the rigor in college, because that is what they're trying to assess by looking at their GPA or looking at their test scores. Can they handle it here? Right? So that it can be a really great opportunity as well. And I think if you're deciding between the three of them in terms of what to do over the summer, it's really going to depend on your student and their interests and their schedule and their availability. So that particular question might be a little more nuanced. All right, we're over time. I'm happy to stay a few extra minutes if anybody else has other questions. But if I've done them, then great. I hope this was really helpful for you. And watch your email for the recording and some additional resources. All right, I hope to hear from you. You know, we're here to help. Thank you, Lakshmi. I appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your summer, everybody. We'll talk soon. Bye.